Welcome to the StoryADay podcast. This is Julie Duffy, encouraging you to be a writer today, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from StoryADay, and I wanted to talk to you this week about the second part of what I started talking about last week, which is the process of going through a debrief after an event or a big achievement. It's a thing that I've started to do in recent years. Some of you may have always done this, but at the end of something, I had a tendency to just sort of walk away or keep going without taking a moment to reflect. So what I've put together is this exercise where you get to debrief the experience, whether you actually went through StoryADay May and wrote, or just sort of as a general exercise for you in your writing life when you've been through a big project or finished a novel, or maybe in other parts of your life where you've run a marathon. You want to do a debrief at the end so that you can sort of take a breath, look at what you achieved, polish up your medal, put all your stuff away. Think about where you're going to find it when you're ready to come back to it again, or at least, tidy up so that you can keep moving forward on the next few stories. And you want to sort of capture the lessons learned from the perspective of technical stuff, like the actual stories, the actual writing, your actual running technique, whatever it is you're debriefing, but also to take a moment to assess your mental state. Like, what did you learn about yourself going through this process? Because you are part of it, right? How you approach the work, how you approach the experience, your mindset, your energy levels, all of that stuff is going to be important next time you try to do some work or do a big project or run a big race. So last week I took you through exercises 1 and 4 of my debrief process, which included just thinking about what you learned about your writing practice in terms of the best time and place and what worked best for you, what time of, how long your energy lasted, that kind of stuff. And then I took you through the final exercise, which was to plan for the future. What will be your next major goal for your writing, and how will you stay accountable to that? So if you haven't heard that yet, you can go back and listen to episode 2010. You can go back and listen to episode 210. I'm not quite at the 2000s yet. And today I wanted to lead you through the middle 2 exercises. And having thought about in exercise 1, what was your best time of day to write? What worked best in terms of days off versus days on? How long could you write before your energy sagged? What best environment? What best day of the week? How did special events affect you? I'd like to turn now to the actual writing. So grab a pen and a piece of paper or your laptop and get ready to type these questions down. You can also, of course, come back to this later if don't have any of those things handy. But here's what I think is really really useful, especially at the end of this particular challenge, where you wrote a lot of different short stories. And the first question is to sort of journal about and think about is, what types of short stories came most easily to you? We have a tendency to think that we need to be tortured, or write like somebody else, or write this particular type of story. You pick up a copy of the best American short stories and you read through all these literary short stories and they're wonderful and you think you ought to be writing like that. But it turns out that you write satire really well, or you write romance really well. It's rare for a romance or a comedy to get into that collection. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be writing them. It means you should be aiming at a different collection. And if you try to force your writing away from what comes most easily, because you think something else is more worthy, you're going to shortchange readers and you're going to make life awfully hard for yourself. There's a lot of people out there who like types of writing that don't get into every collection. You're not going to win. It's Nebula weekend here, the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Awards. And, you're not going to win a Nebula if you're writing romance, and that's fine. Unless you're writing romance on a spaceship. But, you're not going to win a Nebula if you're being published in the New Yorker, probably these days. They don't tend to publish an awful lot of science fiction. So, what stories came most easily to you? We, as a culture, as a people, tend to resist what comes easily, and we tend to devalue it, not understanding that what comes easily to us does not come easily to everyone. And just because something comes easily to you doesn't mean it's not worthy. If you are churning out stories easily, chances are you found your groove, you found your niche, you found your genre, and you're writing in a structure and a genre that you understand in your bones because you read a lot of it. So don't discount what comes easily, and don't apologise for writing what comes easily. So that's your first question. Write about which types of stories came most easily. And if those are the 7,000 word stories, or if those are the 700 word stories, make a note of that as well. So what was easy? The next part of this section is what length of story came most naturally. I started to talk about that there. I find that most people have a natural length that you can write to in a day, or that you feel comfortable with writing right now. That can change, and the more you write, the more comfortable you will get with writing at different lengths. As you get more sophisticated as a writer, you may find that your stories are getting longer because you can make them more complex and still make them hold up. As you get more sophisticated as a writer, you may find that you're writing shorter because you understand what needs to be left out in a short story or in a concise novel. Some people write doorstop novels that you could hold the oak door open with, and that's what they do. Some people write 260 word exquisite jewel box novels, and they are also amazing. So what came most naturally to you right now? What length of short story came most naturally to you during this very artificial experience of trying to write a story a day during May? What you may find is, and what I've found in the past, is that you hit a length that is comfortable for you because at the end of that, your energy starts to sag a little bit. And you may find that if you switch in this month to writing novels, that the scenes that you're writing for your novel or for the chapters for your novel, they're also coming out at the similar kind of length, and you'll start to notice, and you'll go, oh, right, so 1,200 words is really where I need to stand up and take a break. And I might be able to do 2 or 3 sessions in a day where I write that number of words, but I shouldn't get discouraged if I get to 1,200 words and I sort of start thinking about going outside or going to the fridge, or, that's just understanding your natural rhythms is really helpful, because then you know what's going on. Look in a very clear-eyed way as you journal about this. Don't be judgmental, just write about it so that you have data that you can work with and you can build on. If your natural length is 500 words and then you start getting up and getting fidgety, you may need to work on extending that a little bit. It's not judgment, it's just data. Okay, so think about that one. Write about that one. I find it's thinking about them. We get into spirals. Writing about these kinds of questions in a journal helps us to see very clearly what we're saying, see very clearly when we're whining, and decide what to do about that. Sometimes we just want to whine, and sometimes we'll whine so much that we get sick of ourselves and say, okay, this has to change. So journal about this stuff. Don't just think about it. Don't just stay in your head. Get it down on paper or photons or however you choose to do your brainstorming. Okay, the next question in this section is, what mood, style or genre did I write in more than most? And
Again, not judging, not saying that any of this is wrong, just sort of count. How many weird little stories did you write? How many flash fiction stories did you write? How often were your stories sad? How often did they have happy endings? Just sort of quantify what came out. And once you've done that, you can look at it in a slightly different way for the next question, which is, which style or mood or genre did I most enjoy writing? Quite often people write stories that are sad and dark, and they tell me that they are, that's really how they love to write, because it allows them expression. Quite often they don't know why they're doing it. I suspect it's because it allows them to express stuff that they need to keep suppressed the rest of the time, because they're nice people who live in a society and, can't always say the things they think. And these dark stories might let that come out in a very healthy way. It might be other reasons. There might be stuff they need to deal with, from the past. And sometimes people say to me, I keep writing all these sad, dark and twisted stories and I really don't want to be. I can't tell you whether that's the right response, because sometimes writing the things that scare us is powerful and important. And sometimes you might notice that you're writing stuff that doesn't make you happy and you don't want to do it, and you change. I can't tell you which way you want to go there, but it's worth looking and assessing and taking a sort of scientific approach to what you wrote and whether it's what you want to pursue. Next question for you, once you've journaled about that one, is, am I comfortable writing short stories at all? If you spent the last month writing short stories and you hated it, maybe you're really an epic novelist. Maybe you're really one of those people who should be writing the same story until you have enough pages that you could squash a small dog. Maybe that is you. Maybe you thought you needed to be writing novels and you've discovered that short stories are really exciting you right now. And then some voice in your head starts saying, oh, but novels, you have to have novels so that you can sell it, and you have to, you're never going to be successful if you don't write novels. You need to shush that voice, if you don't mind me saying so, because you're not there yet. And if you are there yet, then we can have a different discussion. If you have a contract for 2 novels sitting on your desk and you're avoiding it by writing short stories, that's a different discussion. But I think for the majority of people listening to this podcast, that's not where you are. And I do know people who have contracts for novels who also take time out to write short stories, to refresh themselves, to fulfill other contracts. So you can balance these two things. But deciding to write or to focus on short stories now because A, you discovered you had a good time doing it, and B, you think there's more for you to learn here, is a very sensible decision if you enjoyed writing the short stories, because every skill that you learn writing short stories will come in handy if you later decide to write novels. And you can expand them out. If you learn how to juggle 2 characters in a story and really tell both of their stories for 6 pages, then you're going to have some things that you've learned that you can expand when you're trying to tell stories across 300 pages with maybe 6 characters. So everything you learn doing short stories, it is a different form, but the skills that you learn, the way that you learn to go from once upon a time to the end, and to draw a structure and to pull the reader through that story structure, that skill is going to be useful on a larger scale too. So, are you comfortable writing short stories, or are you really a novelist? If you hated the process of needing to rein your stories in and you felt like there was nothing for you to learn there, great, go write novels. It's fine. You can still hang out at StoryADay. We talk about all kinds of stuff that applies to writing in general. We're not going to banish you. There's plenty of people in the StoryADay community who are writing novels, myself included. So you can do both.
You can do one, you can do the other, but you should focus on the thing that you love to do and the thing where you're currently learning something. And don't forget that short stories can actually still make you a living. It's not going to be just from the short stories, but they make movies from short stories. They still make television shows based on short stories. You can get noticed and invited to do other projects. You know, there's so many ways to make a living as a writer that don't look like you might think they do. That's a topic for another podcast. In fact, you should pick up Jane Friedman's book, The Business of Being a Writer, if you're interested in making this a profession. But if you are just interested in writing and the writing practice, that's kind of what I'm walking you through with StoryADay May. You got to practice, and then this month these podcasts are focused on helping you figure out what you learned and what you can put into practice so that you're writing more consistently, being more creative, having more fun, doing the work that you love, doing the work that only you can do. So, are you comfortable writing short stories, or are you really an epic novelist? Answer that question, and then go on to journal a little bit about the types of stories you wrote. Did you enjoy writing character-based stories, action-driven stories, mystery-driven stories, or stories with a strong sense of place, or a strong sense of social change? Or which did you enjoy writing most, or was there something completely different that you enjoyed writing? Have a think about that. And then, what elements are strongest in your writing? What comes easily, and what do you get when you show it? If you show your writing to people, what do you get the least or the most positive feedback on, and the least suggestions for changes? Do you write strong characters? Is your description fantastic? Is your action, dialogue, or your sense of pacing and intrigue? What are the things that probably come most easily, and that you get the most compliments on? What elements of your stories really work? And once you've spent some time patting yourself on the back and feeling good about yourself, then you can think about what elements do your stories need more of. So if your characters are fantastic, but you tend to have one character in a story, you probably need a little more dialogue and action in your stories. So maybe think about ways to do that, like throwing in an extra character, making them talk to each other. So think about what really is working in your stories, because you can just sort of put that to the side and go, okay, good, I don't need to worry about that just now. Until I get to the next level, this is working. And then you can spend a little time thinking about what do your stories need more of? What would they benefit from having more of? Like, what would give them more depth? What would give them more richness? And if you don't know, start showing them to some trusted friends and ask them what they enjoyed. Ask them to ask you questions, what they expect to happen next, what they were anticipating at various points in the story, and whether that paid off. Ask them if there's anywhere they got bored and sort of started to skim. Don't ask them to fix it for you, but just ask them for their reactions to it, like in a very specific way. And again, that's a different podcast, that's a different lesson. I can point you to posts on the blog about that. Just for the moment, journal about what elements are strongest in your story, and where could you what do you maybe need more of? And that's the end of exercise 2, which was all about figuring out what stories and what you learned specifically about your short story writing. Exercise 3 is a little more practical in terms of your writing practice. It's about sorting out your stories. So set aside a little bit of time. Don't do this now while you're listening to this podcast, but think about setting aside a little bit of time to go through everything you wrote and just quickly sort them into 3 buckets. In category 1, put stories that you think you might want to revise, rework, and share. These are the ones that keep nagging at you. It's been a few days since the end of the challenge now, so you'll have some stories that bubble up to the top of your mind. And some of them will bubble up because they were terrible, and some of them will bubble up because something about them worked. They're maybe the ones that go into this bucket. You think you might want to revise, rework, and maybe share these stories somewhere. Then put some of your stories into the second bucket, which is these were useful stories. Maybe they're background for a longer work. Maybe they were backstories for a novel you're thinking of writing, or a novel you're already writing, or a memoir you're working on. And so these stories, they were very useful. Let's put them in a folder or a mental bucket at least, where you're like, thank you very much. You are going to be useful to me in a way that is not sending it out to publications or turning you into a short story. I'm going to put you over here. The third bucket is for stories that were an interesting exercise and that you feel no need to go back to. There will be lots of days when you wrote and you were just like, oh, this is not working out. And actually, I'm going to suggest that you separate the feelings you had on the day you wrote from the actual thing you wrote, because you may find that on days when you were struggling, you actually wrote something good. There will be other days where you may have thought you were writing something wonderful and you look at it again and you're like, okay, well, that was an interesting exercise, and you want to be a little bit Marie Kondo about it and thank it for coming into your life and teaching you what you needed to know, and then let it go. You can store them in a folder somewhere if you want to. If you're braver than me, you can just delete them. You can take them out and burn them on the barbecue. I don't care. But I think it's really useful to acknowledge that some things that we write are about the process. They're about figuring out what we don't want to do. And that's fine. You know, it's not, nothing was destroyed, right? Maybe some paper. So these three buckets that you have, the first bucket is for things that, and you don't have to do them in this order. The first bucket is for things that you think you might want to go back to. The second bucket is for things that are useful in some other kind of ongoing way as background for other projects perhaps. And the third bucket is things that were just useful to do and you don't need to worry about them ever again. I would expect fewer than 30% of the stories that you wrote in StoryADay May to fall into that first bucket, where you think, oh, there's something there. I'm going to work on this one. I would expect, in my experience, fewer than 30% to be there. That may be different for you, but don't be disappointed if it's, way less than a third of the stories that you wrote. So, between this week, going through and looking in depth at what you actually wrote, and last week thinking more about the process of being a writer and the plan for going forward as a writer, I hope these two podcasts have been useful as a transition between the StoryADay May challenge and the rest of your writing life. I don't want you to come to a screeching halt at the end of May and just never write again until September or November or next May. I do want you to keep writing, but before you just plunge ahead and keep churning out first draft after first draft after first draft, but I want you to think about what you learned from StoryADay May, because I know that going forward and just churning out first drafts, you're going to reach a point where you start to feel dissatisfied. And that's a good thing, because that means you're ready for the next step. And if you've taken some time just now to assess where you are, where you want to go, and to really look at what's working for you, I think that will make taking that next step, when you feel ready to take it, that will make it much easier. Also, it means that you won't be sitting surrounded in piles and piles of drafts and not knowing what any of them are and just feeling like you're drowning in them. So think about that process of sorting them into, thank you very much, you were very useful, you can now disappear from my life, thank you very much, you look interesting, I'm going to put you over here and work on you at some point, and then thank you very much, you guys are going to be so useful as background for another project. And I'd be very interested to hear how you get on with this exercise and how you, what sort of percentages your stories fell into, and also what come over to the blog, find I'll put a link for this post in the show notes. Really interested to find out what kind of the questions, answers to the questions in part 2 of this exercise that I started with today. What length of story came naturally? What style and genre? What came most easily to you? Really interested to hear what you learned. That's what I have for you this week. Happy writing. If you want to learn to write, don't read another book or article. Start writing. I'm here to invite you to consider the StoryADay 3-day challenge. It's a challenge and a workshop that gets people writing and completing stories in just 3 days. And it works. I'm fanatical about getting more and more diverse stories into the world, and I think yours should be among them. If you're feeling the pull to write or level up your storytelling, let me hold your hand through 3 days of short story writing. Check out the 3-day workshop at storyaday.org/3DC. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.